And joining us now on the Medi-Share guest line is film director Andy Erwin. Andy and his brother John directed the new movie American Underdog, which is coming out on Christmas Day. We're going to talk all about this movie with Andy today. Previously, the Erwin brothers have directed and produced the movies I Can Only Imagine, I Still Believe, and Woodlawn. All three movies I have seen and love all three of them. Andy, it's so great to have you on Unpacking It today. How are you?
Dude, I love that intro, man. And I'm obsessed with, I'm looking at all the memorabilia in your room. Like I like a Luke Kuechly jersey
Yes,
and Kobe Bryant. Man, you got a lot of cool stuff in there.
absolutely. I don't think I have any Alabama stuff because you're from Alabama. Are you Crimson
I
Tide
am.
or Auburn?
I'm an Alabama fan.
Okay.
Kind of born and raised. I bleed crimson. But the other day, so Coach Harbaugh is showing American Underdog to the Michigan team, and so for a video for the team, I may or may not have put on a Michigan hat and said "Go Big Blue." It was a defining moment.
Wow. Oh, that's cool. How did that happen for him to show the movie? That's a really neat thing.
It's exciting. It's just been exciting to see a lot of different teams that have wanted to kind of inspire their team and have asked to kind of show an early cut of the film. So we did it for the University of Alabama. We did it for Clemson. We've done it for a lot of different, pro athletes are watching on the side. A lot of gold jackets and Hall of Fame players. But it's just kind of trying to get the buy-in of the sports community because we felt like this film really blends both, family, faith, and football. So it's something that brings a lot of cool communities together.
Absolutely. Well, that's my big question. So I've seen the movie. I loved it, and I'm a Jesus follower, so I love Kurt Warner's story in that regard. I'm a huge sports fan, so I love that aspect, and I'm also a romantic. I love a good romantic comedy, and so this movie had it all. But I'm so fascinated from your perspective as a director. How difficult was it to capture all the elements of Kurt's story, and how did you guys end up kind of landing on what you guys did decide to focus on? Because to me, this
Yeah.
is like a three-part trilogy of Kurt's story, but you guys, honed in on one movie for him.
Yeah, very, very much. Doing a movie like this is when it has all the elements that are naturally there. It's about reduction rather than anything else. You just have to figure out what fits and what doesn't. But I remember, I started as a sports cameraman, so back when we had this film hobby that was growing out of control, we used to pay the bills by working for sports on the weekends. And I remember the only Super Bowl I ever worked was in 2001. It was Kurt Warner's second Super Bowl, and he was playing against in his first. And I was doing the post game show, and I was working for ESPN. Stuart Scott was my reporter, and
Uh,
I remember like watching it all play out. And by that point, the Super Bowl to the supermarket to the Super Bowl had become kind of sports legend history over that year period since he had won the last one. But I just remember watching the guy and watching him interact with this young, spiky-haired, kind of tough as nails former Marine in the stands. And it was his wife Brenda, and I was like, I want to know the story behind those two
mm.
and their relationship together. So fast forward 20 years, I would have never guessed that I'd be the one telling the story. But we sat down with Kurt and Brenda in their home in Phoenix and just asked them, what do you see your story as? And they said, as much as it is about football, it's really about what was going on behind the scenes at home, about us
Mm.
fighting to keep our family together and really our relationship with our son, Zach, who has special needs and is blind. They're like, that's the story we want to tell. And I looked at John and I was like, we could do that movie.
Uh,
And so we really honed in on the home life that produced the champion, gave him the heart of the champion. So when we go out on the football field, it feels like Rocky. I mean, it's like that moment where you're just cheering for the guy.
uh, absolutely. I mean, I love Kurt Warner, his story, and what we've known as sports fans. And to your point, to now with this movie, see what was really going on and what he was going
Yeah.
through just to get there. It's inspiring and remarkable. And even as a dad and a husband myself, it's just it was inspiring on that side of things. So I'm so glad you guys made this movie. And so what was the process? How long did it take to get Kurt and his family on board with it? Did they come to you? And then what was kind of the entire process to now Christmas Day, the big release?
Yeah, it really was like, a story in of itself getting it to the screen, because Kurt had been wanting to develop his story for about 5 years and had been stuck at other studios. And when it was brought to us, the rights were lapsing, and we were looking at, hey, could we do this movie? And so we had started to develop it, and then the pandemic hits and it shuts everything down. And so we thought that the story was dead. We thought there's no way this is going to get made in
Really?
this environment. But in the middle of that, we were like, if there was one person on the planet to play Kurt Warner, it's Zachary Levi from Shazam. I mean, because they look like,
Chuck.
they're, long lost relatives. And I was like, it's got to be Zach. And I knew Zach from years past. We were both Christians that were starting to kind of get our start in Hollywood. And he was farther along than me. He was on a TV show called Chuck, but
Oh
we used
yeah.
to hang out at his house. And so when I was talking to him on Zoom one day after the shutdown, and I just said, he said, "What's this Kurt Warner movie I keep hearing everybody mention my name with?" And I said, "Well, Zach, I know your schedule at your book for the next 3 years. I wasn't going to send it to you." And he said, "Well, send me the script. My schedule may have opened it up because of COVID." And I sent him the script, and he said, text me back at midnight. He said, "I'm in tears. I love this script. Let's go make a
Oh,
football movie." And so when he came on board, it shot adrenaline into the whole system, and the studio flipped out. They're like, "This is a big movie."
mm.
And they gave us the support we needed to go out and shoot this movie in the middle of a pandemic. And every ounce of that struggle ended up on the screen, and really, really proud of the result.
Absolutely, as you should be. And Zach was great. I was a huge fan of the show Chuck when I was in college. So
Right.
to
Yeah.
see him now play Kurt Warner, it was he nailed it, and just the way he moved, I thought he because Kurt has a unique kind of strut
Yeah.
to his walk, so he nailed that. And then I thought Mike Martz was great, and Dick
Yep.
Vermeil, both
Yep.
of those
Yep.
roles, and of course Dennis Quaid played Dick Vermeil, so that was
But
good casting on your team's part as
yeah,
well.
yeah, it was cool with those roles. So there's different people that are kind of icons. Especially, I'm a huge football fan. I love NFL, even though I don't really have an NFL team because I grew up in Alabama.
Yeah,
I love the NFL, and so trying to get people that are icons correct in the story was important. And two of those being, Dick Vermeil and Mike Martz. And so Mike Martz is played by Chance Kelly, who's an incredible character actor, and he disappears in the role, really steals a lot of his scenes. Kind of what we talked about, that March wasn't necessarily the screamer; he was more the Clint Eastwood that kind of intimidated with a whisper.
mm,
And so I talked to March and to Vermeil on the phone before we shot, and got a lot of little tidbits about what they did. So like a lot of those moments in the film, like when March goes after him about botching the snap in practice, that really happened. March said, "I
love
had
it.
to see if I could break this kid." He said, "I wasn't a screamer, but in that moment, I gave him everything I got, and he didn't crack." And
Ah,
uh, and so and then the moment with Vermeil, I talked to Vermeil about what are the moments that only you would know about, and he said I saw something special in this kid because I was out of football for 15 years as an announcer.
mm,
And he said, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but I pulled him aside in the hallway one day and I said, "Son, there's something really special about you. I can't wait to find out what it is." And I said, "Oh my gosh, can we use that in the movie?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, it's fine. Don't screw it up, kid." And I was like, and so I reached out to Dennis Quaid because I had done another movie with Dennis called I Can Only Imagine.
oh
And
yeah,
I said, "Dennis, I'll let you play whatever role you want." I said, "But I think it's really cool when an icon plays an icon." And so I had put together a highlight reel of all of Dick Vermeil's most iconic quotes, and I sent it to him. It's like a 45-minute highlight reel, and he watched it and he said, "I'm totally in. I want to play Vermeil." So the
ah,
coolest moment between those two was when it was over. I connected Coach Vermeil with Dennis Quaid on a text thread, and I introduced them. And Vermeil had seen the film by that point. He said, "Dennis, you made a better Vermeil than I did." And then Dennis said, "This was the most iconic role I've played." So it was a cool kind of fly on the wall moment.
I love it. And I thought the press conference that he did was really good, and then of course the special scene with him and Kurt at the stadium. So so
Yeah,
for listeners that
and the
get a chance
press,
to go
yeah,
see
yeah.
it,
Yeah, that press conference scene is funny because my mentor was a big Rams fan. So he's a cameraman that's named Tim too. That's a Monday Night Football cameraman still to this day. And
Cool.
Tim, he was like, just be aware that press conference is our Gettysburg Address. He's like, don't screw it up. And so he watched it at the end, and he watched it. He's like, and Dennis had studied all the mannerisms, everything that actually happened, and he watched it. And he's like, thumbs up, you got it. So it worked out.
He did it. Even the hair I thought was impressive. So I was
Yeah,
looking for all the details. But and speaking of that, because I'm a sports fan, and so I love the week to week drama. Like it's not a movie;
yeah,
it's real life. I'm watching it every
right,
Sunday and every Saturday, throughout the football season. And so for you to tackle a sports movie as a sports
right.
fan, what are some of those challenges and obstacles that you face as a director and producer to try to capture something that is unique and different from what we experience. And to me,
Right.
it's a tough thing to do.
Yeah, for us, what I wanted to do, and John, my brother that co-directed it with me, um, we wanted to kind of give you real life stakes, so that when you go out on the field and you do this, you have this moment that you have real life stakes at home that give it meaning. So we really patterned it much more after a movie like Rocky or Cinderella Man, kind of fight movies where
Mm,
you're in the ring for the right reason, and you're like, you're rooting for the guy because of what he's going through off the field, and you go in there to get a specific moment with that character. So we kind of earned that, and we intentionally kept the football very contained until we get to the NFL. And when we get to that Ravens game, man, a couple of things. I'll geek out on you because I love sports too. But
yes.
when we got to that game, we you know we didn't want to shoot it like you had seen it before. So typically with a football movie, you shoot it from the outside in, TV camera angles, long lenses, kind of shooting down towards the field. We're like, everybody's seen that angle, so we're like, let's actually put you in the action and put the
Mm,
camera wide and in the middle of it, kind of like what Saving Private Ryan did for war films.
mm,
So we shot it wide in the action, and then we used all that archival footage and we choreographed every play down to the frame of what happened in real life. So the stunt team, like whoever did the tackle, how he landed, how he got up, how he celebrated, was exactly what happened in the telecast, so that we could intercut this archival footage back and forth, to where it kind of gave this visceral feel, like it's happening in real life. It's not something you're watching that happened. It's something you're experiencing now. And so it was kind of born out of necessity because we didn't have enough time to film everything that we wanted to, but it
mm,
turned into like this visceral moment. And then when we got to that moment, we're like, what game do we want to really hone into as his moment? It was really that first start that he got was the
yes.
iconic moment we wanted to recreate. And we went back and said, what was the game that was his coming out moment? And we got to it, and it was like, oh my gosh, it was the Ravens against Ray Lewis. And you can't have any more intimidating, antagonistic, opposing force than Ray Lewis. And so putting him in that moment, and we had a former NFL linebacker named Nick Harris that played for the Panthers. He played Ray. He's an aspiring actor, really good guy. He comes in and just channeled Ray Lewis. And then I
Yep.
was like, who called the game? And I started listening to the telecast. And I was like, oh
Gus.
my gosh, it's Gus Johnson. I was like, nobody calls a better game in football right now than Gus Johnson. He's really cinematic. And so we reached out to Gus, and I said, we need to recreate everything that you did in the game, and a word for word, but we want to recreate it. And he got emotional, and he said,
Oh,
holy cow, he's like, I was a young play-by-play guy, and I got assigned that game. And he said, I thought I was going there to cover Ray Lewis versus Trent Green. It was going to be huge for my career. And Trent Green gets injured, and I got this kid from Iowa, this kind of corn-fed guy that played arena football, and I thought it was going to be a dud. And he said, who knew that 20 years later it would be the end of a movie? And so got him to come back in and revoice it, collaborated on it, and just it was just a treat. So it was just all the ingredients were there for this sports moment that really kind of doesn't let you down.
Absolutely. I loved the back and forth because I loved seeing the old footage and thinking back, gosh, where was I when I was watching that
Yeah.
game and
Right.
kind of thinking back.
Yeah.
So that was a really neat end to the movie for sure. Well,
Yep.
all right. I could talk all day with you about it, but we're limited on time. You, of course, you're weeks away from the big release. Is a big deal.
Right.
So very, very exciting. I did want to ask from a spiritual standpoint, could have gone a lot
Mhm.
of different directions. I think people in general are familiar with Kurt Warner. What a tremendous
Right.
faith, and he's very outspoken about his faith. What was your approach with that specifically? And I guess what was your hope as a director who wants to inspire and point people to God with this
Right.
movie? What was your hope and kind of the takeaway?
Yeah, John and I, we do true stories. It's what we love, and we always center it around faith in some capacity. Whether that's a movie like I Can Only Imagine, or another football movie we did called Woodlawn. We really embrace it for what it is. We don't apologize for it, but we also really ask, like, what does this movie want to be? What does this story belong as? And when we talked to Kurt and Brenda, we said we want to make this faith real, but we want to make it you guys. And how do you see it as? And they said, we'd like to do a mainstream football movie that doesn't shy away from the fact that we were Christians,
Hmm.
and kind of earn the right to be heard, but to kind of connect with a mainstream sports crowd. And so when we got into it, we kind of honed it around that. And the cool thing about Kurt and Brenda is their faith wasn't in a neat little box. It was kind of messy.
Hmm.
Brenda was a Christian as a single mom. Kurt was not a Christian yet when he met her as a fifth year college senior, and but they fell in love, and they would it had a real life kind of love. They said if they weren't you know arguing about their faith, they were making out, and it was just kind of like they were just kind of this rough around the edges. And it wasn't until she experienced this big personal tragedy that
Mm.
really kind of grounded her in her faith, that he said he watched how Brenda really struggled through things with God. And he said, for her, it's a relationship. And he said, I want what she's got. And so he came to Christ through that moment and said, God, I need you in my life. And it was in that moment that the two of them got very grounded. They got married, and then he was like, "My destiny is not to be famous as a football player. My destiny is to fight for this family." So it's really about a call to manhood, about stepping up for your family, about your partnership of fighting for your marriage, and about a wife that is an equal partner in that journey. And so when he gets to the end, I think it leaves the audience with this rush of hope that God can use the messiness of my life, and all the brokenness and the failures and the struggles. And it's not without purpose, that God has a bigger thing that he's trying to do, and it's to redeem it and use it for his purposes. And that's really the hope of this story. And I think people are craving hope like that right now.
Amen. Absolutely. This is the type of movie we need right now. It's inspiring. It's encouraging. It for those of us chasing dreams, it keeps you going and persevering. And so, thank you for making the movie. Thank you for coming on, unpacking it to talk about it today. And I'm excited for our listeners to go and see it. American Underdog coming out nationwide on Christmas Day. That's a great way to spend Christmas. So, thanks, Andy. Really appreciate you being a part of unpacking it today.
Appreciate you, Bryce. Thanks, buddy.
Absolutely. There's Andy Erwin joining us here on the Unpacking It podcast presented by Medi-Share.